Hello, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Whether this is lunchtime for you or maybe early morning, I appreciate you being here. I'm Debbie Schwartz, the founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. We still have people coming in from the waiting room. While a few more people are coming in, I would love to know who's here watching. Just quickly share where you're watching from. Um, what year in high school your student is in. I think we sent invitations mainly to parents of sophomores and juniors, but I'm curious to see who's here. And if anybody, because you guys are on the earlier side, have you been thinking about college? Have you been talking about it with your student? Have you been doing any research? We just would love to know. Oh my gosh, somebody in sixth grade. Well, okay, I guess we sent it to even some people that were earlier, but I'm glad you're here. Okay, great, thank you. So this is technically a Zoom meeting. It is not a webinar. I only share that because you've come in muted, but if you truly want to unmute yourself and ask a question, I am all for that. I love to hear people's questions directly, but also just feel free to put questions in the chat and I will look over there and answer as many questions as I can, either while I'm going through the slides or at the end. Oh, grandparent. Well, that's nice too. I mean, actually, we've had a lot of grandparents involved. Whether, as you said, it's just too much for the parent or they just want to help out. So I think that's lovely. So thanks for being here. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about merit scholarships. I'm probably going to touch on phrases and maybe words that you're not familiar with because you're at the beginning of this process. So stop me or ask a question. I might have forgotten that, maybe you don't know these acronyms, but I think, I have tried to make it as clear as possible. And I'm just going to share my screen and get started. Okay, let me just make sure I have my chat open again. Great. Okay. It's just helpful if one or two people just put a thumbs up if you're seeing my title slide, which says Understanding Merit Scholarships, to make sure that I'm on the right screen. Thank you. Okay. So let's get started. So today I'm actually, I didn't always do this, but I'm going to talk a little bit about student loans and some of the changes that were passed this past July and they're going into effect this coming July 2026. And the reason is these changes do impact people's ability to potentially get certain type of funding. And if you know that earlier in the process, then you will hopefully be more, you pay more attention to where your student applies and the costs much earlier on. So a lot of times people kind of put off the idea of learning about loans until they came to the point in the process where they felt they needed it. But I've always felt it's important to know about it earlier on. I just couldn't get people to be more aware of it. But now with the changes from the federal government, you really have to be aware of it before you even start the college process. So I'll get into more detail about that. Then I'm going to talk about SAI. This is kind of one of those first acronyms. It's called Student Aid Index. I'll explain what it is, and I'll explain how it relates to the search process and also just understanding what your family's college budget is. We'll talk about merit scholarships, and then I'll show you the tool that we have, which just helps make the college search easier because we've always been focused on the finances. And so the data that we have is a little bit more financially oriented, and it helps you find the colleges where your student will get merit scholarships, and hopefully will you have a better chance of affording sending them to school without taking on too much debt. Okay, so really quickly, there's only three main buckets that people can draw from in paying for college. The first is whatever you've been able to save. and I never make a judgment on what people can and cannot have saved. We never know what people's, financial situation has been over 18 years. Some people have had more ability, some people haven't, but basically, you're using money that you have in a 529 or maybe just in other accounts. A lot of times family also really look at their spending habits and try and, pull them in as much as possible several years before college and even during the college years, and, and cash flow as much as they can. So and then the other bucket of family contribution is sometimes from grandparents, which is lovely if they can contribute. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is free money. And of course, that's what we're here today. We want to maximize as much free money as you can get. The different types of free money are need-based financial aid, and there's only so much you can do about whether or not your finances will make you eligible for need-based aid, and we'll explain a little bit about that. But if you are eligible for need-based aid, you want to make sure that you're applying to the right schools that can offer your student that type of money. The second category is really the bulk of what we're going to talk about, merit scholarships. And then there's private scholarships and government grants. So why do we focus so heavily on merit scholarships as opposed to private scholarships? And so the reason is majority of students, what we say is that the largest scholarship they will get is from the college that they enroll in. So colleges give out money. They give out money in the form of scholarships. They give out money in the form of need-based aid. So you have to understand what I call the financial aid giving philosophy of a college. Which college is offering need-based aid, which is offering merit scholarships, what type of merit scholarships, that type of stuff. And your student will get the most money doing that type of research. I'm not saying that students won't get money through private scholarships. And of course, there's always those outliers of students that get hundreds of thousands of dollars in private scholarships. But the majority of students, honestly, won't get private scholarships, and the students who do get private scholarships are getting them in small amounts, because that's just the way private scholarships are offered. They're offered, $500, $1,000, maybe $2,000. Not bad, but it just takes a lot more effort to get that money. And then majority of private scholarships are not renewable. So whatever effort your student did the first year to get private scholarships, they have to continue to do that every year. So it's just a matter of where to put your effort to get the best return. And I believe that your effort is most well spent looking for merit scholarships. Then if you're a student and you have extra time, go after private scholarships. So just my philosophy. I see a quick question. This is being recorded. We always send out the link to the recording the following day. And then the last bucket is borrowed money. So if you don't have enough from your family and you maybe couldn't get enough through different free sources of free money, then you're left with this gap. And the only way to cover that gap is through some sort of borrowing. The majority of people borrow student loans. Sometimes people, refinance their home, or they take out some other type of loan, but and I'm not saying that that's bad or good. It really is situationally dependent, depending on how much equity you have in your home, depending on how secure your job is. Please, the one thing I will guard people against doing is borrowing against your 401k. I think that that's personally very risky. But going back to student loans, you can either borrow student loans from the government, and I'll explain more about those loans, and those are the loans that have changed or will change in July of 2026. And then whatever money you can't get from the government, the other source is going to private lenders. And personally, private lenders aren't bad. They're kind of filling a need that's being left there because of the price of college and what the government can offer. But you need to do research about which lender can give you the best rates and what their features are. And that is something we also cover, but a little bit further down in the process. Okay, so let's go to these borrowing limits. So today and going forward, a student can borrow from the federal government, but there are limits on how much that they can borrow each year. So sometimes it becomes a little bit of like a I don't want to call people are shocked, but people have this notion, well, whatever I can't, cover for my student for college, they'll just borrow it on their own. And the reality is they can borrow a little bit, but they are capped at what they can borrow in their own name without a creditworthy cosigner. And these are the limits that that the federal government has capped in the past and is going to continue to cap. So the first freshman year, a student can borrow up to $5,500 from the government. Sophomore year, $6,500, and then junior and senior year, $7,500. And any student can borrow these dollar amounts as long as the family fills out the FAFSA. You don't have to have financial need to borrow this money. I mean, your family, your parents can have millions in the bank and you can still borrow the money. You just have to fill out the FAFSA. But there is a total cap over what you can borrow, and that's $31,000. That's like a lifetime. I'm not sure if it's lifetime, but it's definitely over like 5 or 6 years of going to college. But you can see if your student is going for 4 years of college, all they can borrow is $27,000. So just kind of start working backwards and understand what some of the costs are of college these days. Yes, the private colleges are up into the 90,000 now. Even like the tier below that are probably 70,000, and even state schools are sometimes between 30 and 40,000 in state, and then out of state, they're maybe in the $50,000 or $60,000 range. So you can see that a student is not going to be able to cover these costs on their own. And then there's sometimes this idea of, well, my student's quote independent. Why can't they just, why do they need me? And unfortunately, our idea of independent even is different than what the federal government's idea of what an independent student is for student loan borrowing purposes. So as you can see, we just put the criteria on the right. It's very difficult to declare yourself independent unless you're 24 years old, you're married, you're a graduate student, you're an orphan. So you can see going that route just isn't going to be a possibility. Most students are considered dependent and they have to live within these caps. A slight kind of variation to these rules that, again, are part of the changes that are going into place in July 2026 is that in order for a parent to borrow anything from the federal government, a student has to have maxed out what they can borrow first. Most times that's the way people approached it anyhow. That's always been the advice that we have given families for years. If your family needs to borrow, your student should borrow from the federal government first, and then figure out what else needs to be borrowed and how you go about it. So that's always been the conventional advice, and now they're just including it in the regulations that that's what students have to do before parents can get involved. Okay, so here are the new changes that are going into effect. Again, July 2026, and so it will impact everybody on this call. So there are loans called the Parent Plus loan. You may have heard of it. And basically, these are loans that are only in a parent's name. The student is not at all on any sort of legal documents for the loan. So this is solely the parent's responsibility, which is a decision that a parent needs to make. This is the federal government lending money to parents to help pay for college. In the past, or even currently today, but this is what is changing, a parent could borrow up to the cost of attendance, which is the kind of like the high sticker price of a college. They could borrow whatever they didn't have to pay for college from the government up to the cost of attendance. So colleges and parents kind of always felt like they had that as their that was their protection, in that they always had a source to borrow from. They could always go to the Parent Plus loan to borrow from the government. A few people would get rejected, but the majority of people are approved. but it's not always the best rate. There are fees attached to it, but at least there was a source to borrow from. But that has changed. And the change is that the parent is going to be capped at $65,000 for a lifetime per student. And I should say it's the household. Sorry. So each student, whoever their parents are, married, single, divorced, those parents together can only borrow $65,000 for that one student. And they can only borrow it in annual amounts of $20,000. So it's not that the math doesn't add up, but the math is saying is that I can only borrow $20,000 for 3 years, and then in that fourth year, I can only borrow an additional $5,000. So that's the way this is going to work. And if you don't borrow money, let's say in year 1 and 2, and then in year 3, you think, oh, well, I've got $65,000 because I didn't borrow in the first 2 years, still doesn't work like that because there's an annual cap. So you'll only be able to borrow $20,000 even per year, or if you've got it left, even if you haven't borrowed in the first few years. So you can see that between what the student can borrow, it's $27,000. What the parent can borrow, these are like max dollar amounts for 4 years, it's $65,000, and it's a total of $92,000 over 4 years that you'll be able to borrow without going to a private lender. I'm putting all this information out here. We haven't even started about searching for college, because to me, it is so important that people understand the finances, you understand your budget, you understand how colleges award money before you even start searching for colleges. I mean, I'll make the quick analogy, which a lot of us have are homeowners, whether it's an apartment or a house, and you wouldn't go out looking for a home until you knew how much you can put down for a down payment and what your mortgage, what you could be approved for mortgage, right? You wouldn't go out without that information because it's kind of pointless, and you're to some extent like wasting your time or looking at things you can never afford. And that's kind of the same situation here. You should have similar parameters. You should understand, how much you've saved, if your student's going to borrow, how much they can borrow, how much money you might be able to get from a college before you really start taking your student on college visits and deciding whether your student's going to apply to colleges. And all of these numbers can be estimated before you get too far into the process. Okay, so now this is the section where I call know your numbers. And we're going to talk through, these acronyms and how you, what they mean and how you use them for your own process. So sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So the first number is costs of attendance. And this is, again, something you might hear, the sticker price. These numbers are on the college's website. You can actually Google the name of a college and just either COA or cost of attendance to kind of go directly to that college's website information. And this is the combination of tuition, room and board, and other types of fees that they might have. They'll include things like health insurance, which you don't actually have to take, but they'll include it, an estimate for transportation, and an estimate for general kind of living expenses. So this should be kind of the most that somebody ever pays to go to that college. And the college legally has to share this information. And so, and a college, has that information out now for their current academic year, which is the academic year 2025 to 2026. What's a little bit frustrating is that colleges don't show and they don't even necessarily know what the tuition is going to be for the year that your student is researching for or looking for colleges yet, because colleges don't set their new tuition rates until usually May or June when like their board meets and all that type of stuff. And it's an issue even for students and parents going through the college admissions process, like in the current year. They're looking at numbers which you just should know are not going to be the numbers when you actually get your tuition bill, because the numbers you're looking at now are this year's tuition number and room and board number, but they're not next year's. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes we tell people, if again, you want to be realistic, take this year's numbers and, increase them by an estimated 5%, because we've seen increases anywhere from 3% to 10%, unfortunately. And you can actually also go back to whatever colleges you look at and see like what the rate increases has been over the past few prior years to get an idea of what range they increase their tuition in. But it's good to know that and factor that in. So Student Aid Index, SAI, is the outcome of filling out the FAFSA. And basically, this used to be a different name called expected family contribution, but they changed it because they wanted people to really understand that the number is not the number you're going to pay for college. It's a number that the colleges use to understand your financial strength relative to other families that are applying to them. So it's a number that can range actually from negative 150 all the way up to, whatever the calculation is. But so if there are two SAIs, and this number actually also is used by the government to determine whether a student is Pell eligible, whether they'll get a Pell Grant. But students that maybe have an SAI of, let's say, 20,000 versus a family that has an SAI of 40,000, what that is saying is not that that's what that family is going to pay for college, although it helps kind of determine what they'll pay for college, and I'll explain that process in a minute. But what it's saying is the family with 40,000, again, it's not saying that they can afford to pay for college, but that they have more financial resources than the family with 20,000. So it's almost like an index of neediness, to say which families are more needy for either government money or the college's need-based money versus other families. So I actually encourage everybody to go find out what their SAI is. There are estimators, you can do that, but we did a webinar with the CEO of an organization called NAFSA, which is the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. And it is like the national organization for all of the financial aid people that work at colleges. And the woman was amazing. And her advice was go onto the government website now and fill out a FAFSA. If your student is not applying to college, the information goes nowhere. As part of filling out FAFSA, you actually have to put in a code that is the code for the college, so that the college knows to pull your FAFSA information. If you never put in a code, nobody's ever pulling that information. And so the reason why I say that is, sure, you can go to estimators, but why go to an estimator when you can go directly to the government's website, and they'll give you the exact number that if your student was applying for aid this year, the colleges would use. So go fill out a FAFSA. It's so much easier than it ever was in the past. You'll also get a little practice about what the process is, and you will take out any nerves. The people are very nervous always about filling out the form. So I didn't always recommend this, but since she recommended it just a few weeks ago, I think it's a great idea to get the most accurate estimate of your FAFSA. It's not even an estimate. If you were to apply this year, this is what the SAI would be. And then you'll use that information as part of your student's college search process. So we've got cost of attendance, SAI, and now the colleges use these two pieces of data to say, what is your family's need? So the cost of attendance, right, is the most that any student should pay. And then they subtract your SAI, which is what they determine is maybe close to what they think families can contribute to college, although it's really not a contribution number. And then what's left is what they call your family's need. So this is the gap, and we know that this family is not going to be able to come to college, or our college, until they figure out how they can cover the gap, the family need. And then we're going to talk about how colleges may or may not help you with that family need. And then the fourth number is your number. The government's not involved, the colleges aren't involved. This is what your family has determined is your family's budget. And again, there is no judgment. You just have to look at your own savings, look at, obviously how many kids you're sending to college, what other expenses you're dealing with, your retirement, and decide how much you're willing to pay towards your students' college. And please do that again before you start the process, because all of these numbers need to come into play when you start researching and you start discussing college with your student, and you start visiting and all of that stuff. The worst situation is if a parent or families don't kind of do this type of work, they just let their student apply, and that's becoming less and less frequent these days that families are doing that because of the cost of college. But it wasn't that long ago where we worked with a lot of families or saw families and said, well, I just want them to get into the best school, and then I'll figure out, how we pay for it. Some people still want to approach it that way, but with the cost of college, if you don't understand these financial situations at the beginning, you could be left with few options after your student applies. And the few options means that they might have got into college, but they got into schools which you can't afford, and you're kind of then really pushed to have to take out loans, when maybe if they had been smarter about where they applied, you wouldn't have to be taking out loans, or maybe not as large of loans as you're being forced to. So, okay, let me see what questions there are. If you do the FAFSA like you suggested, then does it go away and you just do it again for the real year? Yes. It does go away, but when you fill out FAFSA, you're creating what's called an FSA ID that you have for life. So just keep track of that number. You will use that FSA ID, when you have to fill it out for real. Your student, you'll be creating an FSA, you will, or with your student, creating an FSA ID with your student. So save and keep track of that information, but whatever you enter this year, yes, it just completely gets wiped for the following year, or whenever your child, decides to go to college. And nobody sees this information because no college is ever pulling your FAFSA. So this is a table that a partner that we work with, partner is named Juno, put together, and I think it's really worthwhile. It's meant to give you an estimate, a sense of what somebody's what somebody's SAI, family's SAI might be, if you don't want to, fill it out for real or even do an estimate. And the 4 components of SAI are the family's income, the family's income, the parent's income, the parent's asset, the student's income, and the student's asset. Most students don't have incomes and they have very little assets, so we don't really include it for this estimations, point of view. We really focus on the parent's income and the parent's assets. And of those 2 pieces, the parent's income is the biggest driver. So if you look at this chart, on the right is just different levels of parent income. On the going across horizontally are the assets, and it is, again, just to give you an idea. I think what's important to see is when it's likely that a family's not going to get financial aid from any school, and that's likely when the SAI gets into that category, into the 90,000, because if most schools cost 90,000, or if your SAI is above 90,000, which would be above the cost of most colleges, they're not going to give you aid, because they're going to look at that number and say, well, these are the least needy families out there. I don't need to give them aid. I'm going to focus on the families with a lower SAI who have more need. So that kind of break tends to happen with a household income of about 300,000 and, assets of about that amount too. Again, this is not perfect science, this chart. It's just meant to give directionally, because people always say, well, yeah, what if my income is 400,000? Will I get aid? You probably won't. But there's this kind of on the fence numbers, if you make between 200 and 300,000, there's actually a likelihood you will get aid, depends on your assets and depends on where your student applies to college. So, and then people lower down, again, you are probably likely to get aid. And then the next big question is, even though you are a family that might fall into the category of needing aid, and your SAI kind of shows that you should get aid, your next step is to find colleges that will offer your student aid. Just because you are aid worthy, so to say, it doesn't mean that every college is going to offer you aid, because that now you have to know what their financial aid giving philosophy is. So now you have to go research the colleges and figure out which colleges usually give more money to families with need, versus maybe it's a college that gives nothing, or maybe it's a college that gives out more merit scholarships to families who don't have need. Oh, good question. Can you pick and choose which schools you check off applying for financial aid on the Common App? Since we are only filling out financial aid forms to be eligible for merit at certain institutions, trying to avoid doing a CSS profile for the one school on our list that requires it. Yes, you can. You can pick and choose which schools you want to ask to apply for aid. So good question. Okay, so here is how you start to use all of these numbers. I'm going to give the example that this is a family that has, this is the example on the left, a family that has an SAI of 30,000. So depending on the school that they apply to, they might have need. The first example, they applied to a school where the cost of attendance is 50,000. So going to back to the formula of cost of attendance minus SAI, this family's gap is 20,000. Okay, so they have need. And the next step would say, okay, is the college that they're applying to give money to need-based families, need-based aid families? So that's a possibility. And you can see if they apply to a different school with an even higher cost of attendance, their need increases, because their SAI stays the same regardless of what college you apply to, but your gap can increase or decrease depending on what the cost of attendance is at that school. So if they apply to the school that costs 80,000, now they have a family need of 50,000, a larger gap to cover. And then again, we need to then check, does that school, will that school cover that much of a gap or not? And I'm going to show you where you get that information, but I'm just kind of walking slowly through the process. The example on the right is a family with a larger SAI. So their SAI is 90,000. So again, depending on the schools that they apply to, they may or may not have need. At a SAI of 90,000, most colleges, they won't show as having need. But so in the first case, this family is applying or looking at a school with a cost of attendance of 40,000. Obviously, their SAI is 90,000. So this college is going to say, your SAI is way above what our cost of attendance is. They're not going to get any need-based aid. They could get merit scholarships if the college offers merit scholarships. And we're going to talk about that next, but they're definitely not going to get need-based aid. And then again, even if they're applying to a more expensive school, like 80,000, as long as their SAI is higher than the cost of attendance, they are never going to be eligible for need-based aid. So somebody's asking, does the value of your primary residence considered as an asset? So there are two forms, financial aid forms, that families tend to have to fill out. The FAFSA is almost everybody fills it out, again, especially if you want to take advantage of any federal loans. And then for a select group of colleges, I don't know what the exact number is now, maybe about 330 colleges, they use a form called the CSS profile, which is administered through the College Board. And basically you can almost think of it as their version of their college's own FAFSA, because it is a financial aid form. It asks a lot more detailed questions. These are colleges that are using much more of what we call their institutional money. They're using more of their money to give to families. So they feel that, and it's, a right of these colleges. They feel that if we're going to give our money to these these families, we want to really know a little bit more about their financial situation. In addition to what the FAFSA asks, because the FAFSA just kind of is a light look at your financial situation. A CSS profile is a deep look. So to answer this question, the FAFSA does not ask about your primary residence, so it's not involved. On the CSS profile, a lot of schools ask about your primary residence. A lot of schools use that information as in their calculations. Not every school, but a lot of schools do. I would go into the process assuming that the CSS profile school will use your primary residence. And the reason why, actually, I can't even give you exactly who might use it or not, is that the colleges are using the CSS profile form. Whatever the formula is that they are taking the information from the CSS profile and using it to calculate their version, let's say, of an SAI, they don't share that formula. It's you can call it proprietary. They're private institutions. It's how they want to look at people's families' financial situations and what they want to determine is important or not important in somebody's finances. So there is a list floating around the internet that somebody had once done of like research, or maybe even calling schools to find out which schools actually use a primary residence in their calculation. I mean, I would Google and see if you can find the list. The majority of colleges are going to use some portion of the family's residence. So I would just kind of like go into the process with that understanding. So how does the home value play into the calculation? It's really based on what your equity is that you have, and they are assuming that maybe they usually take a ratio of how much equity you have in the home, and they might be calculating in the fact that you can tap into that equity to use it to pay for college. How do you know which colleges require the CSS profile? So the College Board has a page on their website that lists all the colleges that require the CSS profile. So that's one way. A college itself on its own website will absolutely, on the financial aid page, tell you that they require the CSS profile, and other websites might as well. Actually, our search site includes that information as well. Okay, I'm going to go on, and then I'll go back to the questions. So here's another look at using all of these numbers. And in this case, I included the family's budget. Let me just, oh, thank you. You muted yourself. So in this, again, it doesn't matter what your income is, what your SAI is. If you determine your family has a certain budget and you want to stick to it, that's fine. You just need to incorporate it in as you do your research. I always give this example. It's a true example. It's a lovely family who we worked with a few years ago. And to be honest, the family was, had enough money. They could have paid for their daughter's college, whatever college she wanted to go to, but they had other situations going on. The first was that the daughter knew she wanted to go to medical school. So they were being very cognizant of what the cost of medical school was going to be, plus undergraduate, and basically felt like, well, we want to just be more budget conscious about where she goes to college because we're going to help her with medical school. So that was a reason why, they wanted to come up with a budget. The second is they had other expenses that a college isn't going to show up initially on the college's financial aid form, but they were helping to take care of an elderly parent. And actually, their big expenses, they had a child with special needs that they knew that they were going to have to support, throughout their whole life. So they had other finances that just weren't clear if you looked at their, household income. And they decided that they wanted to really find a school that the net cost was that they created a budget which was $45,000 per year and said, we want to find a school that's what it's going to cost us. Even though in theory, we can pay more, we don't want to use that money for undergraduate, we want to use it for medical school. And they did. It takes it takes work. And the first step is to recognize what your budget is. And then it's using that information as part of the search process and estimating where your student can potentially get merit scholarships, and then what the net cost is going to be of colleges after your student might get scholarships. So, okay. If you can keep yourself muted, that would be helpful. And I'm sure you maybe just muted by accident, but everybody hears the background noise. So, okay, this quick example, the family's budget is $45,000, but they have an SAI of $90,000. So they know they are not eligible for any need-based aid at any schools. So if they wanted to get close to the budget, they're going to have to, can you please keep it muted? You keep unmuting it. So in order for them to get to their budget, they needed to find schools where their student was going to be eligible for merit scholarships, because that's what's going to help bring down the cost for families who aren't going to get need-based aid. So you can see in the example on the far right, this family had SAI of 90,000. They're applying. Hello, Polly. Hello, can you please keep yourself muted? So they were very stringent about applying to colleges where their student was eligible for merit scholarships. They, could find a scholarship that would bring the cost down low enough. And if they couldn't, or other families, might fill the gap with loans. But at that point, your loans hopefully will be much smaller than if you weren't paying attention to finding the schools with merit scholarships and understanding what your budget is and what the potential money is that a college might give you. Okay. So what is merit scholarship? As you can see, there's lots of different terms for it. In some cases, it's truly a scholarship. I'll explain how and why. In other cases, some people have viewed it as a discount on tuition. And it depends how colleges use what their approach is for giving merit scholarships. For colleges, and there are colleges out there that basically set a tuition or, set a cost of attendance. And then if you look at their numbers, and we'll show you where to look, every student who applies gets some form of a scholarship. Basically, 100% of students are getting scholarships. So is that really a scholarship, or is that more a discount that they're offering to every student, but they're kind of setting their price high because maybe it gives a prestige that they are of a certain level. So some people call merit discounts. Sometimes they're called scholarships. In a lot of schools, it plays both role. Do you care? Well, you might care if it's truly scholarships because there are other requirements. In other cases, it's just kind of like a pricing strategy, good or bad, that colleges use, like some retailers use where they're always having sales. That's kind of how some of the college pricing works for certain colleges. So merit aid, merit scholarship is truly not dependent on your financial need. Colleges aren't awarding the merit based on what your SAI is. They're awarding the merit based on your students' academics and sometimes some other talents, and we'll talk about those. They are awarding it to, the better, the academically stronger students who, relative to the average student that might attend that college. Colleges are definitely using the money, because I'm gonna almost like to reel in a fish, to attract a student that is stronger, that might not have considered their college if they weren't being offered merit scholarships. So they're trying to improve their overall academic profile by attracting that stronger student. So they tend to offer merit money to students that are in the top 25% of their academic range. So that's why you want to look at what the college's, SAT, ACT scores are. If they're sharing their GPA, look at that. And you want to figure out, and I'll show you how you can figure out what the top 25 percentile is for that school. And if your student has test scores in that range, then it makes them a much more attractive candidate to get merit scholarships at that school if the school is offering merit scholarships. So you see, you have to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. The other good thing, which I kind of mentioned earlier relative to private scholarships, are that merit scholarships, which are generally offered as part of the admissions process, are renewable. So if your student is offered this merit scholarship, they're going to be given it in freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. They usually don't have to do anything except meet what a GPA requirement. And when your student is awarded the scholarship, they'll also be told what the GPA requirement is, and you just have to feel comfortable with your student that they can make it. Again, it's going to depend what that number is. Some schools, it's relatively easy. It's a 3.0 GPA. Others sometimes do make it a little harder. It could be a 3.5 scholarship GPA. And then I would be just careful with your student to see if they feel comfortable if they could make that GPA, because you just don't want to be in the situation where you as a family have decided to send your student to a college, and that college is affordable because of the merit scholarship. But if your student loses the merit scholarship, you've lost the money and you're at the school, and that school now becomes much more expensive. So you want to feel your student, and your student wants to feel comfortable that they can attain and maintain the GPA that's connected to the merit scholarship. Okay. So somebody's asking, it's so weird that some schools say they still require the financial aid forms to be considered for merit. Why is that? So I've asked that of admissions and financial aid people, and the answer that I've gotten back is that usually the college wants the family to fill out the FAFSA to be considered for merit. I have to honestly, most schools that are asking for the CSS profile are not schools that give out merit. They're schools that only give out financial aid. But schools that give out merit who might ask you to fill out the FAFSA, it's because they want to make sure that you're not eligible for any government aid, because they want to make sure that they use the government aid first before they use merit aid. So that's the answer that I've been given. Somebody's saying I bet it's for demographics or for reporting. I agree with you too. It could definitely be for those purposes as well. So I think that's the answer to the next question. If they're asking to do the financial aid form to be considered for merit, does that mean that they really are not 100% merit? I still believe that the merit is given based on academics, but again, they just want to make sure you're not eligible for anything else. Okay, so there are these 3 categories of merit. These are not official categories. These are just categories we've created to make it easier to explain the different types of scholarships. There's automatic, competitive, and talent. So automatic means that your student doesn't have to do anything, that they just need to apply to that college, and that the college looks at every application and says, does this student meet our criteria for offering merit? We're going to give it. So in my view, these are the best types of colleges, the easiest in terms to deal with. They usually put their merit criteria clearly on the website, and it's usually different SAT, ACT ranges or GPA ranges, and they say if your student falls into this range, they will automatically get this dollar amount. So that's the automatic part of awarding the money. It's the combination of if you fall into a certain bracket, you'll get money, and the fact that everybody is reviewed as the applications are submitted. The second is competitive, and there are a lot of schools out there that give good merit money, but they kind of make the student go through a few different steps. It could be because they're giving money based on whether a student is accepted to the honors program. That's very common, that a college will have an honors college or an honors program, and they will only give the merit money to those students because, again, if you're accepted to an honors program, you tend to be a stronger academic student for that college. So competitive means that you're you're doing something more than just sending in your application. In some cases, there could be a separate application for scholarships. There could be an additional essay. There could be an interview. So it's really important to look at the websites of your students, the colleges that they're thinking of applying to, and understand all the criteria, all the deadlines associated with scholarships. It is also not uncommon that the deadline for students to apply for merit is different than the regular decision deadline. So you may know that there are several different types, of deadlines involved in the process. Could be early action deadline, early decision deadline. There's regular decision, there's early decision 2, there's early action 2 these days. And some colleges say if you want to be considered for merit, then you need to apply as part of our early action deadlines. There's no college that makes you apply early decision to get merit, but a lot of the colleges now are saying if you want to be reviewed for merit, then you need to apply early. And either they have an early action round where you need to use those deadlines, or sometimes if schools don't even have early action, they might have an earlier deadline just for scholarships. So please be aware of these deadlines, track them down, put them on a spreadsheet with your child, because the worst case is that your student misses the deadline. They could be accepted to the college, but because they missed the merit scholarship deadlines, they don't get the scholarship money, even if they were eligible for it. And the last is if you have a specific talent, there's definitely colleges that are giving merit based on, whether it's an art talent or singing or dancing. And those scholarships usually go along with some sort of audition, a portfolio, which also have separate deadlines for signing up for these auditions or when to send in a portfolio. So please be aware of all that information if your student wants to be considered for these scholarships. Okay, here's just an example of a school that gives automatic merit and kind of where you would find it on their website and what it looks like. And I just give the example because I was tracking this school since 2020. You can see that the criteria changes over time. Obviously, also back in 2020, you needed both because these schools were test required then. You needed both an ACT, SAT, and a GPA. But over time, that has changed. And this school in particular is Miami University of Ohio. And they offer merit scholarship. They're basing it on the GPA. They're also basing it on a weighted GPA, which is a little unusual, to be honest. Most colleges are using the unweighted GPA just so that they feel like they have an apples to apples comparison among students. And actually most colleges are recalculating the GPA so that they can use this unweighted. So that's another important thing. Really make sure you understand the criteria that is being used to award the scholarship. So if it's weighted versus unweighted, that's important to know. And then it's kind of clear. So if your student is interested in Miami University, you can see, okay, and they have like a 4.3 or higher GPA, and I'm an out-of-state resident, I'm, at a minimum, I'm going to get, a $15,000 merit scholarship. So if I want to start estimating, and I don't really know Miami University's cost of attendance off head, but let's just say it's $50,000 for out of state. So now it's really likely that if my student applies, generally, if they're, stronger academically, they also have a higher chance of getting accepted. And then my student would get accepted here and get at a minimum $15,000. So now I can estimate that Miami University is going to cost me $35,000, and I can kind of go forward in the college search and application process with that understanding of where Miami University's final numbers are going to come in relative to other colleges. Okay, so we have, I can go over 1 o'clock, but there's not a ton of time yet. I'm gonna skip now to show you our Insights platform, so where you can kind of also use this information to better filter and find colleges. So let me, oops, get out of this for a second and go to another tab. I'm curious if people want to write in the comments, how many people are familiar with something called the Common Data Set, and have you looked at a college's Common Data Set? Okay, so this is, and the reason why I'm asking about Common Data Set, good, I see yes, is, oops, good, is a lot of the information that we have in Insights is from the Common Data Set. So there's two main sources of college data out there. One is the Common Data Set, and another is government source called IPEDS. Got to be honest, it's not clear how much longer IPEDS is going to be supported, is going to be available. It always tended to be a source that was a little behind in time because it just took the government longer to get their data together. And the Common Data Set tends to have more up-to-date data and just more detailed data in the areas that we're interested in. So I would say that really 90% of the data that we have in our website is from the Common Data Set, and we just provide it in a much easier way to filter and sort it. So let me give people the website. And you can try it out for free, and then if you want the full access, there is a monthly fee. But so I'm just gonna log in and show you some interesting things. Okay, so this is the dashboard. We just kind of, depending on what year in college you are, we tell you what types of things you should be doing that year. This section here is where you can build your lists. When you get to the point and your student is applying, you can kind of say, okay, these are the schools that he or she is actually applying to, and then we can help track it. And then when your student gets offers, you can put offers into the platform, and then you can see other people's offers, which is actually really interesting, fun, and provides a lot of insight. But and then the row down here is we have specific videos for people in the library to kind of help them explain different parts of the process. Like we have a video here on what SAI is, where we go into more detail. And then if people want one-on-one help, we can help with that. But the purpose of this platform was really actually for what I call the DIY family, the family who wants to do research on their own or do as much of the process on their own, which I think is great and kind of helps you become really educated as a consumer and teaches your student how to approach, a complex system, and you understand the details of what's going on, which I think is important. Okay, so if I go to Discover, I want to search for colleges. This is our database of over almost 4,000 colleges. You can see that number at the bottom, and all the data that we offer. You can scroll through here, lots of data. We've made like our own kind of smaller views of the data. So something called R2C Picks is just the data that we think if you didn't want to get overwhelmed, this is the data you should look at. If you wanted to just look at financial data, we've, narrowed it down to just the columns that have financial information. So these are different views that you can look at, and if you get more complicated, you can actually make your own view. Like if there's a certain set of columns that you like, then you can say, okay, I want to, these are the columns I always want to look at, and this is what I'm going to name that view. So you have lots of flexibility about how you can look at the data and the columns. But if I go back to all the fields and I want to filter, so you go to this icon that says filter, And you can filter by any of the fields, and sorry, yeah, any of the fields or any of the columns that we have here. So I'm going to go quickly to some pieces of data that I think are important based on what we've talked about today. So I told you that the 70, like you want to find a school where your students' stats, particularly the test scores, put them at the top 25th percentile. And the reason why I will tell you that we're using test scores, and even if the school is test optional, and even if your student isn't going to send in their test scores, I would still use the test scores for search and filtering process, the process, because the reality is that test scores are standardized. Colleges report test score information much more often than they report GPA. If you look through the data, and this is from the Common Data Set, colleges just don't fill out the GPA data as frequently as they share the SAT, ACT data. I mean, I would say 98% of schools are sharing test data and less than 50% are sharing GPA data. Again, I asked admissions officers about this, and it came down to the fact that GPAs are not standardized across high schools, and they just don't always take the time to standardize it and then report it back in a standardized way. So that's the issue, that they just don't have the time and the processes to do it, which, puts us a little bit all at a disadvantage, because of course we would like that information. So the last point is, even if your student didn't take the test score, there are charts online where you can convert a student's GPA to an estimated test score range. So again, I would use that all for the purpose of searching. So if my child has let's say an SAT of 1350, I'm going to want to look for colleges where that 1350 is in the top 75th percentile, and maybe I want to look at colleges that have that 75th percentile between 1300 and 1400, just to get the range. Okay, so that's one step. So that will give me the colleges where academically my student is strongest. It doesn't yet give me the colleges that offer merit, right? So then I'd have to go down to this field that says average merit for freshmen without need. I could put in, show me all the schools that offer $5,000 and above of merit. I can do it that way. One other way I can do it is we have a field, which you have to, I have to go back, sorry. I'm going to add this in, add the filter, is we have a field that's called the net cost after merit. So a simple calculation, we just said, okay, we know the cost of attendance. We're going to subtract what the average merit is. Again, this is just all to give people a quicker direction to find those colleges. And we have this field called the net cost after merit award. So now you can look at not just what the average merit award is that a college gives, but now you can say, hey, I want to find the schools that give merit, and my net will be like whatever your budget range is. So let's say here, let's say I want to find a school that my budget is 40,000. So I want to find a school that after merit is going to be somewhere between 35 to 45,000. Okay, I don't know if you saw the numbers. They're down here in the right-hand corner. So we started out with 39,000. I filtered it first by just the test scores. I think it came down to 225 schools had a test score where the 75th percentile of the test score was in that range. And now I said, of those schools, I want to only see the schools where my net cost after merit is going to be 45. It's going to be 35 to 45. And now we're down to 45 schools. So that's how quickly you can, like kind of narrow in on the schools where your student is at the top of the academic range, and the schools that give merit, and the schools that might be within your budget. And now what I tend to do is, let's see, I'm gonna you could go to the column, which is this is the net cost after average merit award. Now I can sort this if I want. Let's sort it. Let's see. Oh, well, I could sort it in either direction. Here I'm sorting it in descending order. So, if my student applied to Delphi, Butler, Ithaca College, they have a good chance of receiving the merit scholarship, and I have a good chance that my net cost is going to be close to what it's saying here, 45,000. What I would then do is now do the net price calculator at that school to start to confirm, are they estimating the same? And hopefully, in most cases, it is very similar. Let me show you one other piece of information we have. This is called crowdsourced offers. If you are a paying member of Insights, you can see the offers that people shared with us in previous years. Okay, so if I click on this, now I can look at different academic years. Let's sort the academic years. You can see we go back pretty far, but let's look at the most recent one. And this was this past, this is the students who just started college. This is the offers that they got this past spring. And we also, you can group it by SAI range. So if you're a family that, has a SAI of 60,000 or above, you want to kind of look at those similar students that shared their offers. So I can see that, students in that, and this also shows which students submitted their SAT scores and which did not. So you can see there were students here that didn't submit their SAT scores and they still got merit. And the merit ranged in that, low 30,000 to like high 30,000. So we're not that far off from what the common data set said and from what we were estimating. And, people have used this crowdsourced data. We've had questions about, well, I'm an out-of-state family applying to, a state university. Do they give money to out-of-state students? And you can kind of search here. You can sort it by the state that the student, was in, and you can see, whether or not they're giving money to out-of-state students or not. So that's another way you can use the data. So very helpful. I will share some other quick information columns that I think are helpful. We have a whole breakout of early decision rates versus regular decision versus the overall admission rate, because the overall admission rate masks if a college has early decision, you want to kind of break out what the early decision is versus the regular decision. Another important thing, again, if a student is, as a school has early decision, is what % of the class is being admitted early decision. These schools, although they might have early decision, looks like they're not admitting a large number of the class early. Let's actually sort this a little differently. But okay, well, this is a pharmacy school. Wheaton College of this school class is saying we will offer 20% of our class. We'll give them an early decision offer. So that means that 20% of the class is already, the seats are already taken by the time students are applying regular. That's not that bad. At the more elite schools, there are schools that are admitting 60% of the class early decision, and it just makes the regular decision rounds even more competitive because there are fewer spots and there's going to be more applications. So lots of data here you can see you can use. The other column is if you are a family that could be eligible for need-based aid. So let's say you've estimated your SAI, you see that your SAI is less than the cost of attendance, you have a financial gap. Now you have to see, does that college actually, do they even help families with financial need? And that's the two columns here that say % of need met. And then the average financial aid award for families with need. So the % of need met is saying if you have the need, which we've calculated from subtracting SAI from cost of attendance, if your need, let's say, is 20%, this college is saying we will give you enough need-based aid to cover 69% of that need. Or in this case, Allegheny is saying we will cover 92% of that need. The most generous colleges, again, tend to be the elite colleges that have more money. They will cover 100% of a family's needs. So whatever that need number is, they will say, we will give you enough need-based aid to cover that number, and you just need to take care of what your SAI number is. So for families that might be eligible for need-based aid, you want to look at this percentage column very closely, and then what the average financial aid award is for need-based aid. Okay, so we've gone 10 minutes over. Let me see what the questions are. How do you identify which colleges give automatic tuition discount merit scholarships and how much these discounts are? So I will be honest, there is no place, there's no source that tells you which schools automatically are giving aid, but you obviously can find the schools that are giving aid, and I would find the schools that are giving aid and they're giving, and their academic, their 75th percentile academically is where your student fits in. Because just because they're giving aid doesn't mean that if your student isn't strong enough, they're not going to get them aid, even if they're, quote, giving automatic aid. So, and then unfortunately, you have to go to the college's websites to see if this is automatic or not. There's just not like a central source that identifies that. So here, let's reset this. And again, I would go, if I had a student, like again, in that like 1350 SAT, I would say find the schools that have their 75th percentile is between 1300 and 1400, and then show me, select a school where let's see, that's not the one I want, where the average merit award, you could say 5,000, you could say 200, we could say 1,000. They're giving $1,000 or more in merit. And then there's 211 of those schools. Then I would go to, oops. I would go to this column that says right here, what the average merit award is. I would sort this column by descending, because of course you want to know who's giving the most. And then I would start looking at these colleges. I would go on their website, does Beloit have a chart? If they don't have a chart, then well, I shouldn't say that. If they don't have a chart, all that means is they don't have predetermined categories. The college might be automatically reviewing everybody's application for merit. They're just not telling you how they're distributing merit. So this is a great question to ask. You could write Beloit, if your student is interested in Beloit, say, I know you give merit. What's your process for giving merit? If it's not clear on the website. So if Beloit already isn't telling you, and you know what, we actually have the links here too to the merit scholarship pages. So let's click on that link. Here's Beloit. Here's their information about college, about what's it called? Scholarships. Here, it says right here, there are no additional steps to be considered for merit scholarships. Awards are based primarily on the unweighted and reported GPA used in the ranges below. So they're not saying the word automatic, but basically this is saying they are looking at every student who applies and seeing if they meet the criteria for merit scholarships. So that's kind of like the multi-steps that you need to do for that type of research. So if more colleges look at unweighted GPA, should my child stop taking as many honors classes and just take regular ones where she can more likely guarantee herself an A? That's a tricky question. So colleges, as you can see, they're looking at unweighted GPA, but they are also looking at the rigor of a student's classes that they are taking. So they want the student to take the strongest, the most rigorous class the student can take and do their best. So I wouldn't just say, okay, let me student take the easiest classes so they can get an A, because even though their unweighted GPA might look good, it's going to look suspicious, and the college is going to say, well, they got a great GPA, but these are really easy courses. So, you know, the rule of thumb is you want your student to take the hardest course that they can still feel comfortable they can get at least a B in. So I would balance. I wouldn't have your student take the, you know, AP or the hard class and they end up getting a C. That is not worth it. You know, you do want to be cognizant of that, of what their unweighted GPA is going to be. So somebody asked, are all these features, and let me go back to insights, in the free version versus the paid? So in the free version, you get to do 5 searches for filters, what I just showed you. You can't filter on every piece of data in the free version. And you don't see the crowdsourced data in the free version. So you don't get access to everything. You get a sense of what how the tool works and what information is there. And if you pay, you get access to everything I showed today. You get access to some of the webinars that we have in recordings, and you also get a discount on if you want to do any one-on-one services. So to do the type of research and filtering I showed you today, you do need a paid account. Okay, so thank you for the people who have hung on. I am going to say goodbye and wish everybody a good weekend. And as always, feel free to reach out with questions. You can send me questions at debbie@rhodecollege.com or at support@rhodecollege.com. Okay, take care. My big push, get started. This is not, I mean, I hope you don't feel that this is difficult. It's just a matter of understanding the process and, you know, spending the time to do research. And it's going to be important. Again, I kind of make it equivalent to a house, right? You just don't kind of pick, you know, you don't usually find the house that you end up buying at the right price. You know, on the first house you go to, you have to do a lot of research. You have to negotiate. You have to understand what the comps are. You have to understand what the mortgage rates are, all that type of stuff. It's a similar process. It just maybe spread out a little bit longer, and it involves your child, so it's a little bit more emotional. So, okay, everybody, take care. Have a good weekend.